My ex-husband calls his new child a blessing. He never mentions the one he abandoned, the one he called broken, before she even opened her eyes. I see their perfect family online while I live with a truth I can't tell anyone. Sometimes I wonder who the monster really is, him or me for staying silent. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and heartbreak, and I was sitting right in the middle of it. My daughter, my beautiful, sleeping, 3-day-old baby, was nestled against my chest, warm and tiny as I traced her little fingers with the pad of my thumb. I'd memorized every curve of her ear, every eyelash, every soft breath. I was still floating in that new mom haze when the doctor walked in earlier that morning and shattered everything. Profound bilateral sensorineural hearing loss. She couldn't hear. My newborn was deaf. The words kept echoing in my head even though they didn't feel real. Deaf. Not sick, not dying, not broken, just deaf. But the second I looked up at my husband, Travis, standing by the window like someone had just asked him to perform a funeral, I knew things would never be the same. He wouldn't even look at her. "Meredith," he said, eyes fixed somewhere over the parking lot. "You need to be realistic." My arms tightened around her instinctively. "I am being realistic. She's our daughter." Finally, he turned. And I swear, I'd never seen that expression on him before, ice cold, like he was staring at a stranger instead of his child. "She's damaged, Meredith. How are we supposed to raise a child who can't hear? Do you have any idea what that means? Specialists, hospitals, therapy, bills? You think we can handle that? She's 3 days old," I whispered, my voice cracking. "She's not broken. She just sees the world differently." Before he could reply, the door flew open so hard it smacked the wall. Travis's mother, Constance, stormed in like a storm front in heels. Her face twisted with outrage the moment she laid eyes on my baby. "This," she announced, practically spitting the word, "is unacceptable." She pointed at my child. My child. Like she was pointing at a stain. "Travis, we will not be burdened with this. There are facilities for children like her. You need to think about your future. You need to give her up for adoption." I felt something primal rip awake inside me. Something wild. Something fierce. I turned slowly and looked her dead in the eye. "Get out." Her eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me? You heard me. Get out." Travis stepped closer to her instead of to us. "Mom's right. We need to consider options. There are families prepared for this. This?" My voice trembled, not with fear anymore, but disbelief. "She's not a project someone needs to handle. She's our daughter." Constance laughed. Actually laughed. You think you can take care of her? You can't even support yourself. You work part-time at a dental office. You think you're equipped to raise a special needs child?" The nurse at my bedside shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe this discussion should happen somewhere else." "We're done here," I cut in, tears flooding down my face but my voice steady as steel. I turned to Travis. "You have to choose. Right now. Your daughter, or your mother's approval. Because I'm keeping her, with or without you." He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. Not even a second. "I can't do this, Meredith. I'm sorry. I just can't." And that was it. 2 hours later, after I refused to sign adoption papers again and again, they simply walked out. Like we were nothing. Like my daughter had never existed at all. After they left, the nurse, Patricia, squeezed my shoulder. "What's her name, honey?" I looked down at the child sleeping against me, oblivious to the storm around her. So perfect. So innocent. "Ruby," I whispered. "Her name is Ruby Mae Wallace." Patricia smiled softly. "That's beautiful. And you're going to be a wonderful mother to her." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But my hand shook as I held Ruby. I had $1,500 to my name. I'd always relied on Travis. He liked it that way. I never realized how much until now. The next morning, a social worker came to my room. Loretta Washington, mid-50s, firm voice, kind eyes, no sugarcoating anything. "You'll need health insurance, you'll need stable housing, and you'll need to learn ASL if you want to communicate with your daughter," she said bluntly. "And Travis filed for divorce this morning. His attorney is already pushing for adoption on the grounds that you're financially unstable." Ice crawled through me. "Can they take her?" "Not easily," she said. "But they can try to convince the court. You need a lawyer. Immediately." She handed me a card. "Nathaniel Griffin, Family Law, Pro Bono. I told him about your situation. He'll help you." The next 3 months became a blur. I moved into a cramped studio that could barely fit Ruby's crib. Travis fought to give up custody but still tried to dictate that Ruby should be adopted. His lawyer painted me as irresponsible, poor, unfit. But Nathaniel? My attorney? He was a 60-year-old man with gray dreadlocks, warm eyes, and a fire in his voice every time he defended Ruby. He didn't just represent us. He protected us. "They don't want Ruby," he told me. "They just don't want to look like villains. So they're trying to make you look like the problem." Then he leaned forward, confident. "But we're not letting that happen." And he kept his word, every single step of the way. What I didn't know back then was that fighting to keep Ruby was only the beginning. The real battle was still coming. During the months I spent battling Travis and Constance in court, I lived in 2 different worlds every single day. One world was cold, sharp, and full of legal paperwork meant to take Ruby away from me. The other world was softer but exhausting in a different way. I was learning what it meant to raise a deaf child. Every free minute I had, I poured into learning how to communicate with my daughter. I enrolled in ASL classes at the community college. I practiced until my fingers throbbed, shaping my hands into signs over and over again like I was trying to build a bridge out of my own bones. I sat with audiologists and speech therapists, asked questions until they probably wished I would leave, and I read everything I could get my hands on, research on cochlear implants, stories from deaf adults, debates about deaf culture, identity, language access. I studied like my daughter's life depended on it. And honestly, it felt like it did. My family tried to help, but their support came with thorns attached. My mom, Leslie, would glance around my cramped studio apartment and sigh like she was trying hard not to say what she really wanted to say. Maybe Travis has a point about your living situation, honey. That apartment is so small. It's barely big enough for one person, let alone a baby. My dad didn't bother sugarcoating anything. You're being stubborn. That child needs stability. You can't raise her properly when you're struggling just to stay afloat. Even my little brother Austin, who'd never taken life seriously a day in his life, suddenly decided to offer wisdom. Maybe you should think about what's actually best for Ruby, he said carefully, like I was too emotional to see the truth. As if keeping her with her mother wasn't the most obvious thing in the world. The only person who didn't try to talk me out of being Ruby's mom was my grandmother, Virginia. She showed up unannounced one afternoon, this tiny 83-year-old woman with perfect silver hair, a spine straighter than mine, and more determination than the entire court system combined. She drove 3 hours just to sit in my tiny apartment and hold Ruby against her shoulder. Your grandfather came back from the war hard of hearing, she said quietly. He was treated like a fool by people who didn't bother to communicate with him. But he was smart. Brilliant, actually. Ran a hardware store for 4 decades without needing to hear a thing. She looked at Ruby the same way I did, like she deserved better than the world was giving her. This baby doesn't need hearing to be extraordinary, she said. She just needs someone who believes in her. That's when I broke. I cried against her shoulder like a child. I'm scared I won't be enough for her. She held my hair back and wiped my face with her thumb like she was brushing away something temporary. Fear means you care. If you didn't love her, you'd be calm about it. That husband of yours showed indifference. You're showing up. That's what makes a good mother. Her words carried me through the worst months of my life. Because Travis and Constance didn't just fight for adoption, they dragged me through hell to get it. They painted me as unstable, accused me of threatening my own child, claimed I lived in filth. Every accusation needed evidence to refute. Every lie took hours to dismantle. 7 months after Ruby was born, I stood in front of a judge in a crowded courtroom. Ruby sat on the lap of Nathaniel's assistant, playing with a teething ring and babbling in little sounds only she could understand. Why do you believe you can provide better care than a trained adoptive family? The judge asked me. A family equipped for special needs? I looked at my daughter. Her tiny hands waved, her eyes bouncing from face to face like she wanted to understand everything in her own language. How could I ever explain that love didn't require training? That connection wasn't something you could outsource? Because I'm her mother, I said softly. I love her more than my own life. I've learned intermediate ASL already. I've joined the deaf community. I've researched schools. And every morning, I wake up determined to give her the best life possible. No adoptive family will fight for her the way I will, because no one else will love her the way I do. The judge didn't deliberate long. I was awarded full custody. Travis signed away his parental rights the same day. His mother tried to appeal under grandparent rights, but Nathaniel crushed that effort so fast she didn't even have time to throw one of her dramatic tantrums. I thought we'd finally won. I thought Ruby was safe. I thought our nightmare was finally over. I couldn't have been more wrong. 2 months after the ruling, it was a stormy Tuesday morning. I dropped Ruby off at the only daycare equipped for deaf infants. She was learning baby sign language, clapping her hands and using the sign for love by tapping her chest with her chunky little fist. I kissed her forehead, signed I love you into her palm the way she liked, and left for work. At 5:30, I walked into the daycare as usual. But this time, the director stepped in front of me, her face the color of ash. Meredith, Ruby's not here. The world narrowed to a single ringing sound in my ears. What do you mean she's not here? The director's voice shook. A woman came at 2 o'clock with court papers. She said she was Ruby's grandmother and had temporary custody. We verified it with the number on the form. A man confirmed it. A woman? What woman? My words were barely breaths. She said her name was Constance Wallace. I was already sprinting for my car, dialing Nathaniel with shaking fingers. He picked up immediately. Constance took Ruby, I choked out. The daycare gave her to Constance. Fake papers. Fake number. She's gone. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. Call the police right now. I'm heading to the courthouse for an emergency order. The next 72 hours were hell. Police treated it like a family dispute, and Constance vanished. Her house? Empty. Her phone? Disconnected. Travis was questioned, and I watched him crumble under pressure on the third interrogation. She's connected to a private agency, he said. They specialize in special needs placements. She said it was best for Ruby. I lunged at him. Nathaniel dragged me back. Where is she? I screamed. Where is Ruby? Private adoption agencies. I had no idea how many existed in the shadows. Some were legitimate. Others were glorified child trafficking networks, taking babies under falsified documents and placing them with paying families who believed they were rescuing them. Ruby was a deaf child. Hard to place. Easy to disappear. We brought in a private investigator, Frank Delgado, a retired FBI agent who specialized in kidnapping and black market adoptions. If Constance used her connections, he warned, Ruby could already be with a family who thinks they're legally adopting her. We have to move fast. But every lead died. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My milk still came in. I'd been nursing Ruby. The physical pain almost mirrored the emotional agony, almost, but not quite. Constance and Travis were eventually arrested. He got probation. She got 18 months and served only 9. Ruby was still gone. A year after she vanished, Nathaniel sat across from me in his office. I was barely recognizable, 32 years old with the eyes of someone twice that age. "We have one option left," he said gently. "We need to start with the deaf community. Schools, programs, organizations. Deaf children with her medical profile don't go unnoticed. Someone will know her." "How long will it take?" My voice cracked. "As long as it takes," he said. "We don't stop. Ever." So I didn't. I spent the next 4 years building an army. An army of people who loved the same language my daughter spoke. An army who wasn't afraid of the silence she lived in. And somewhere out there, I knew Ruby was waiting. I didn't just search for Ruby during those years, I became the search. It took over everything, my job, my sleep, my relationships, even the way I breathed. Finding her became the only reason I existed. I joined every deaf group I could find, online and offline. If there was a deaf event happening within a day's drive, I was there. Workshops, conferences, storytelling nights, deaf theater, summer camps, I volunteered, worked, or networked my way into anything that might lead me to her. I learned ASL until my hands felt like they were made of aching bone and heavy muscles. I practiced until the language felt natural, not like something I was learning, but something I was remembering. Eventually, I earned interpreter certification, not because I wanted a career, but because I needed to blend in, to belong in the only community that might lead me to my daughter. I showed Ruby's photo to everyone, parents, teachers, interpreters, organizations, therapists. I became embedded in the deaf world like ivy around a fence. I grew where I needed to grow. And my family, they thought I was unraveling. "You have to move on," my father told me, sometime in year 3. He said it like it was practical, like losing my baby was a breakup I could recover from. "This isn't healthy. Meredith, she's gone." "She's alive," I told him. "I know she's alive. I would feel it if she wasn't." And I meant it with every cell in my body. My mother worried I was delusional. My old friends drifted away. I didn't blame them. Who wants to stay close to someone who has only one topic, one purpose, one obsession? I lived on scraps just to keep the search alive. Every cent went to investigators, travel, forensic image updates, printing thousands of flyers, maintaining a database I'd built myself. I tracked deaf early intervention programs across 12 states. I printed out every year's enrollment lists when I could access them, cross-matched them with ages, hair color, medical profiles, hearing levels. Private adoptions were shadows dressed as businesses. Most records had been scrubbed, sealed, or simply never created. But I kept digging. During the second year, I took a job at a deaf advocacy nonprofit in Chicago. The pay was awful, but it put me exactly where I needed to be, face-to-face with deaf families, specialists, educators. It gave me access to networks most hearing people never see. I spent hours every week telling our story, fingers flying in ASL until my wrists throbbed. Some people hugged me, others looked at me like I was dangerous. At a deaf community picnic, a woman bluntly signed, "Maybe she's better off where she is. You're too obsessed." I wanted to scream. Of course I was obsessed. A piece of my heart had been stolen. What was I supposed to be, calm about it? But I'd learned not to break down in public. Showing emotion made people question my stability, and my stability was the only defense I had if Ruby was ever found. The false leads destroyed me over and over. A tip about a deaf toddler in Michigan: I drove 8 hours, slept in my car, only to discover the child was older and looked nothing like Ruby. A school in Ohio, a teacher was sure the match was perfect. I flew out with shaking hands, only to be greeted by the sweetest child with flaming red hair and green eyes. Not Ruby. Every disappointment was a funeral. My apartment turned into something between a detective's hive and a memorial. One wall was papered with maps, pins marking sightings, timelines, deaf schools, private agencies Constance might have used. Another wall held Ruby's pictures, plus age-progressed photos I generated every year, Ruby at 2, at 3, at 4. I barely slept. When I did, nightmares devoured me. Ruby crying and no one understanding her. Ruby being punished for not hearing. Ruby forgetting my face. Forgetting the sign for mother. Nathaniel checked on me regularly, hovering like a guardrail I kept slamming into. "You're no good to her if you collapse," he reminded me. But I couldn't rest. Rest was a luxury reserved for people who weren't missing their child. Year 3 broke me financially and physically. I worked my nonprofit job, picked up interpreting gigs on weekends, and did overnight data entry for a freight company from my kitchen table. I lived on cheap ramen and day-old bread. I lost 30 pounds without trying. My brother Austin walked into my apartment one afternoon and stared at the chaos, the papers, the maps, the stacks of boxes, the dark circles under my eyes. "This is insane," he said. "Look at yourself. Ruby wouldn't want this." "Ruby is 2 years old," I snapped. "She doesn't know what she wants. She wants her mother." He left, shaking his head. We didn't speak for 6 months. The only person who truly understood was a woman named Monica. I met her at a support group for missing children. Her son had been kidnapped by his father in Mexico. It took her 5 years to find him. She nearly lost everything in the process. Over coffee, she told me, "People think you should grieve like your child died. But missing children aren't dead. They're out there, living a life without you. And that kind of pain doesn't let you rest." Monica became my tether to sanity. She didn't tell me to move on. She knew why I couldn't. In year 4, something finally shifted. Frank dug into the remains of a now-defunct adoption facilitator called Bless Beginnings Family Services. They'd operated out of Pennsylvania and Vermont, specializing in special needs placements. Fraud investigations shuttered them, but fragments of their paperwork survived. In one scribbled document, infant female, hearing impaired, placed March 2019. Ruby had been taken in February 2019. The timing matched down to the week. Frank and I tracked down the woman who once ran the agency, Judith Hammond, 70 years old, now living in a nursing home after a stroke. Her memory came and went, but she agreed to talk. I helped children, she insisted. Families who understood special needs. Parents who couldn't cope. Did you place a baby brought to you by a woman named Constance Wallace? I showed her a photo. Judith squinted, her expression flickering with something like recognition. I worked with many people, she murmured. She brought you a deaf infant, I pressed. February 2019. My baby. Judith struggled to piece together her thoughts. There was a couple. In Washington state. Both deaf. They wanted a deaf baby. They said a child like that should grow up in deaf culture, not fixed. A deaf couple. In Washington. A mother whose name started with B? Judging from her fragmented recollection, maybe. Barbara? Beverly? Judith mumbled. Something like that. But they were good people. I made sure of that. For the first time in 4 years, I had a real direction. Washington state. A deaf couple who specifically requested a deaf baby. Frank began reaching out to deaf organizations there. The deaf community in Washington was huge but tight-knit. If this couple existed, someone would know them. 8 more months passed. 8 months filled with hope and dread living side by side in my chest. I wanted to give up so many times, especially on nights when I collapsed into bed, broke and exhausted, tempted to believe what everyone kept telling me. Maybe she's gone. Maybe you have to let go. But then, I'd see a curly-haired toddler in a grocery store aisle, or I'd dream of small hands reaching for me, and the fire would return. And then, just as I was about to break for good, a woman named Diana White reached out to me. Travis had long moved on. He remarried, settled into a picture-perfect life, and had a son with his new wife, Kelsey. A boy with perfect hearing. They splashed photos of their miracle baby all over social media like Ruby had never existed. Like he hadn't once tried to erase her. Constance was just as determined to pretend she'd done nothing wrong. She served 9 months, hired a high-powered attorney the second she got out, and began polishing her image like a tarnished trophy. She gave interviews, called herself a misunderstood grandmother who'd made a heartbreaking choice to save a child from neglect. In her eyes, I was the villain. But I stopped watching their circus. They were ghosts to me. I only cared about one thing. Ruby. 5 years after she was stolen from me, I was working as an ASL interpreter at a deaf school in Oregon. I'd followed a promising lead there 6 months earlier. It turned out to be nothing, but I stayed. The deaf community was strong there, and somehow it felt like I was breathing the same air as my daughter. It made no logical sense, but grief rarely does. It was an ordinary warm Tuesday morning. I was interpreting at a parent-teacher conference when the school secretary walked in and signed urgently, "Someone needs to see you." When I stepped into the main office, I saw her. A woman in her early 60s, Native American, with long black hair streaked silver and turquoise stones at her ears and wrists. Calm, steady. She introduced herself as Diana White, a social worker who specialized in services for deaf families. "I've been following your search for 5 years," she signed and spoke at the same time. "I believe I have information about your daughter." My knees almost buckled. "You've seen her?" Diana hesitated. "I believe so. A deaf family in Washington state adopted a deaf girl 6 years ago through a private facilitator. The agency no longer exists. The timeline fits. The child's medical history fits. They named her Grace. Grace. Ruby had been Grace for longer than she'd ever been Ruby. "Take me to her," I whispered. Diana didn't move. "It's complicated. The Thustons, Bethany and Marcus, they believe her birth mother died. They were told her father couldn't cope. They think they saved her. And someone lied to them," I said. "But she's still mine." Diana nodded. "You're right. But this will be a delicate, painful process. Legally and emotionally. No matter what happens, a 6-year-old's world is about to be shaken." My voice broke. "Is she happy?" "She's loved. Very much. She's being raised by deaf parents who wanted a deaf child specifically so she could grow up proud, not fixed. But that doesn't change what was stolen from you." "I still need to see her," I said. "Even if she never sees me." 3 days later, Diana drove us north to a Seattle suburb. We sat in her car across from a community center where a deaf children's playgroup met. My hands shook so violently I couldn't hold the binoculars still. Diana pointed. "The girl in the purple dress." I lifted the lenses and the world narrowed. There she was. Tall for her age. Hair in 2 curly puffs. Warm brown skin. My nose. My mother's eyes. Travis's chin. Laughing silently, hands flying through the air with expressive, confident signs. She moved like she belonged there. Like she was home. My daughter. Alive. The Thustons arrived a few minutes later, both deaf, both signing with the same fluid ease Ruby used. Bethany bent to adjust her hair ties, Marcus scooped her onto his shoulders with casual affection. Grace lit up, grabbing their faces, signing rapid jokes only they understood. That moment shattered me gently. I watched a different life unfold in front of me, a life my daughter should never have been stolen into, but one that had held her with love. Her life had been stolen from me. But she had lived. And she had been loved. Nathaniel moved quickly. A DNA test confirmed what I already knew, Grace Thurston was Ruby Mae Wallace. The case became a media wildfire. News outlets tore into the story: abduction, fraud, illegal adoption, deaf culture, the rights of biological parents. Nathaniel used the publicity to build public pressure. The Thustons were devastated. They weren't villains, only victims of the same lie that had destroyed my life. Their lawyer issued a statement: "We believed the adoption was legal. We had no knowledge of the kidnapping." They fought the idea of losing their daughter, of being punished for something they hadn't done. The judge ordered gradual reunification. And I had to call her Grace, because that was who she knew herself to be. At first, I met her as a family friend. A stranger. She avoided me. She signed politely, but her eyes asked, "Why are you here? Why are you in my life?" Bethany attended the visits. Her pain mirrored mine. We sat side by side like two women drowning in the same ocean, trying not to pull each other under. After 3 months, the therapist told us the truth would only get harder if we waited. Grace needed to know who I was. Bethany insisted on telling her. We sat together in a therapy room: Bethany, Marcus, Grace, 2 therapists, and me. Bethany's hands shook as she signed. "This woman, Meredith, she is your birth mother. You grew inside her. You were taken from her. She never stopped looking for you." Grace looked at me with heartbreak and confusion. "You're not my mom." Bethany's tears spilled. "I've been your mom for 5 years. And I always will be. But Meredith is your mom too." Grace turned to me. "Why didn't you find me?" It crushed me. I signed through tears. I searched every day. I never stopped. "I love you more than life. I'm so sorry it took so long." She cried, but turned away from me, burying herself in Bethany's arms. Bethany held her, sobbing too. When she met my eyes, there was no anger. Just shared grief. 2 families broken by 1 crime. Reunification took 2 years. Slow, excruciatingly slow. Therapy, supervised visits, then overnights, then weekends. Sometimes Grace refused to look at me. Sometimes she screamed. Once she called me mean and begged to go home to Bethany. I cried outside her bedroom door that night, silently, ashamed for wanting something that hurt her. Bethany video called me later. "This is awful for everyone except the people who caused it," she signed. "But we'll get through it. Together." We became unlikely allies. We texted constantly about Grace's routines, fears, victories. Bethany sent me videos. Marcus taught me about deaf identity, not just deaf language. He reminded me that signing doesn't automatically make someone part of deaf culture. "You hear," he signed once. "Grace needs you to understand who she is, not who you expect her to be." 8 months into the process, Grace woke from a nightmare at my house and, for the first time, reached for me instead of begging for Bethany. "I dreamed someone took me again." "You're safe," I told her, signing slowly. "Both families will always protect you." She stared up at me. "Do you promise you won't leave?" I whispered the only truth I had. "I searched for you for 5 years. I'm not going anywhere." She made up a sign for me, a combination of mother and searcher. Not mom. Not yet. But something only we shared. Legally finalizing custody was nearly impossible. The Thustons had raised her. I had borne her. Neither bond could be erased. Judge Catherine Brennan had handled unusual cases before, but ours was unlike any she'd seen. During the final hearing, she spoke directly to Grace. "What would make you feel safest?" Grace, now 8 years old, signed firmly. "I want both families. I don't want to choose." Judge Brennan smiled. "Then that's what we'll do." Our arrangement became one of the first of its kind. I got primary custody during the school year. The Thustons got holidays, summers, and shared decision-making in her education, health, and culture. We co-parented a child who had 2 truths, 2 histories, and 2 families who loved her fiercely. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. Grace sometimes tested us, pitting one side against the other. Holidays were a negotiation. My parents struggled to understand. My father asked, "Why be generous to the people who stole from you?" "They didn't steal," I said. "They raised her in a world where she belonged." Because the truth was painful. If I had raised Ruby from birth, I would have loved her, but I would have always been a hearing outsider to her deaf identity. The Thustons gave her something I never could, a life where she wasn't taught to be fixed, but celebrated exactly as she was. Grace had 2 families now. And she needed both. She battled loyalty and confusion, grief and love. Some days she resented me for existing. Other days she buried her face into my shoulder and refused to let go. She didn't need perfect. She needed honesty. She needed patience. She needed every part of her life to be acknowledged. And she needed all of us. Her story wasn't about choosing one family over another. It was about the 2 families who refused to let her go again. We didn't become a normal family, there was no normal to return to, but slowly, painfully, piece by piece, we built something real. I learned who my daughter was in the years I'd missed. Her love for the ocean, the way she could name sea creatures faster than a documentary narrator. Her talent for art, she filled sketchbooks with swirling whales and bright coral reefs. Her humor was sharp and mischievous, she liked to sneak up behind me and tap out silly signs just to make me laugh. And she learned about me. About the nights I slept in my car chasing false leads. About the maps pinned across my walls. About the 5 years I spent with no purpose except to find her. She came to understand not just that I loved her, but that I never stopped loving her, not even for a breath. On her 10th birthday, for years after I'd found her again, she signed something that unclipped a release valve inside me and sent me quietly sobbing in the car for a full hour afterward. "I have 2 families. One raised me. One searched for me. Is it okay if I love you both?" I signed back with trembling hands. "It's more than okay. It means your heart is big enough for all the love you were given. That makes you extraordinary." Travis never reached out. Not once. His parental rights were gone for good, and he'd sealed himself into a different universe where Ruby had never existed. He built a new life with his wife and son, and the silence from him felt like both an insult and a gift. Because if he'd ever tried to step back into her life, I don't know if I could have forgiven him, or held myself back. Constance died 2 years after I found Ruby. Heart attack. I didn't go to the funeral. Her death didn't feel tragic or bitter. It felt like the last door of a prison finally slamming shut. She couldn't hurt us anymore. She never laid a hand on Grace's childhood again. Co-parenting with the Thustons was awkward at first, especially with Bethany. She was the mother who'd read bedtime stories and packed lunches and kissed scraped knees for 5 years. Handing me even a little of that role was like tearing her own heart in two. But she chose our daughter's happiness over her own pain. She never tried to keep Grace from me. She never poisoned her against me. And I will be grateful for that until the day I die. Marcus, quieter but intense, once signed to me through an interpreter at a school event. What happened to you was evil. What happened to us was devastating. But somehow, Grace ended up with 2 families who love her enough to put her first. Maybe that's the only good thing that came from all this pain. He was right. Our story didn't have a happy ending. It had a healing one. Those aren't the same, but they're both powerful. Now, Ruby Grace is 14. She splits her time between our homes like she was born to belong to both. She's confident, fierce, stubborn in the best way. She recently decided she wants to push for new laws, stricter adoption oversight, mandatory verification in cases of deaf children, protections against fraudulent placements. She wants to stop what happened to her from happening again. She's using the pain she lived through to protect others. That strength no villain ever plans for. Sometimes she calls me Mom. Other times, she calls me Meredith. I answer to both. I am both. I don't need ownership, I just need the connection. Last week, she showed me an essay she wrote for school about resilience. In it, she described 2 mothers. One who taught her language, culture, and pride in being deaf. Another who taught her that love never gives up, who searched for her through every impossible barrier until she found her again. You both saved me, she wrote. Just in different ways. Sometimes, late at night, I remember the hospital room. Travis calling her, damaged. Constance insisting we throw her away. The fear clawing at my chest as I held a newborn who couldn't hear my heartbeat the way other babies could. But I look at Grace now, strong, articulate, proud of who she is, and all I feel is awe. The thing they tried to erase from her, the thing they thought made her disposable, is one of the most beautiful parts of who she is. Her deafness isn't a flaw. It isn't a burden. It's part of her identity, her language, her community. She grew up surrounded by people who never tried to fix her, only celebrate her. And I'm grateful her life, even stolen, gave her that. During the darkest years, I fantasized about revenge. I pictured Travis humiliated, Constance rotting in prison, the world seeing them for the monsters they were. But standing in the present, watching my daughter thrive, I finally understood. Revenge wasn't justice. Her life was. Travis lives knowing he cast away someone extraordinary. Constance died knowing her cruelty accomplished nothing. And I got my daughter back. Not the way I imagined. Not fully mine. But here. Alive. Loved. Growing. Some nights, when Grace has nightmares about being taken again, she crawls into my bed. I wrap my arms around her and let my hands speak across her back. I found you. I will always find you. You're never alone. And she signs back, half asleep. I know, Mom. I know. It's the kind of justice no court can order. The story could have ended in tragedy. Instead, it ended with a 14-year-old girl signing, I love you, to 2 mothers, and meaning it with her whole heart both times. I spent 5 years searching for her. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the 5 years we lost. And Grace, brilliant, resilient, holy herself, will spend her life proving that the only thing ever broken in our story were the people who thought she was.